Hello, hello. This is Corissa and Tom on Tentacles, the podcast from Crown and Reach. We are feeling our way through the murky waters of strategy and operations in an uncertain world.
Especially strategy.
Especially strategy today,
yeah.
On this particular Friday, while we're both under the weather, and the weather is also under the weather.
Yeah, very under the weather. But yeah, we got a nice comment from the last podcast we did, which was about the advice that people often hear to be more strategic.
Can't you just be more strategic?
Just do that.
There's no time, resources, training, none of that. Just be more strategic.
So that was a good one, I think, worth listening to unpack some of what we've seen people mean by that. There are more interpretations available, I'm quite sure. But friend of Tentacles, Donald Cox, shout out to you. He made a really good point, which was actually, if you look at the company level, there's only room for so much strategy. And it's not very much at any one time, actually.
Yeah.
So telling everybody to be more strategic is creating a weird competition potentially for a very small number of spots.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you consider strategy something that is only done at the company level, then yes, that would lead to you trying to fight in quite an overcrowded bucket.
Exactly. And I think he makes a really good point, as you say, when you look at the company level. And going back to what we were talking about last week, it's at the company level I've seen it most commonly, where having strategy appended to your name really is a signifier of status and a signifier that you don't do any actual work. I mean, you do work, but you don't do any of the production work, any of the delivery,
Right,
that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it can be quite hoity-toity.
Yeah, it's working, you could say it's working on the business rather than working in the business.
Yeah, on the business from an ivory tower.
Yeah.
But the good news is, well, strategy doesn't only exist at the organisational level.
No.
It doesn't even only exist at the organisational level and the team level.
No, can I use a fancy word and say it's fractal?
Fractal.
It's fractal, isn't it?
Oh, beautiful. I didn't know that was coming, but I'm so glad it did. No, Jim, that sounded really sarcastic.
No, it did.
Fractal. No, that's good, because I think that's a much more accurate way of putting it than like the traditional thinking of layers, right? You've got like OKRs kind of cascade down, right? You've got the organisational level, the sort of team level, and then the individual level OKRs, and they all kind of flow into one another, and that's when they're done.
They don't.
Yeah, that's when they're done really well, which most of the time they're not. But anyway, that's like a kind of, it's trying to force a complex system into something that's very linear and simple, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the fractal thing is like, that kind of captures more of the dimensions that are at play.
Yeah. But yet to be strategic, interesting, this has just occurred to me that there's two aspects to being strategic. One is about doing strategy and doing activities that feel like they are strategy to you, which tend to be about choosing, my favourite definition there is choosing how do we use what's inside of our control to influence what's not. Mm-hmm. And that's the doing thing, but there's also being an agent who is capable of strategy, which is all about like the action of sense making and orientation on a continual basis, without which you can't do strategy.
Okay, I'm not entirely sure I understand the distinction. Talk me through it.
So I think what I'm getting at is, in order to understand what's inside your control, outside your control, and how you can influence it, you need to do sense making on your current situation, and you probably need to be open to reorienting your perspective on what is and isn't outside your control, on where it's worth you putting effort in. And it basically means you take in information, you change your mind, you evolve yourself as much as you are trying to evolve the situation around you.
Right, so just to check I've understood. So firstly, it's about like developing an understanding of how to see what is and isn't in your control.
I think so,
and
yeah.
then secondly, it's figuring out like what can you do to make sense of it, you just said, but figuring out what you can do based on that knowledge.
Yeah.
So it's the kind of like awareness, and then it's the ability to act based on that awareness.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that does make sense. This went kind of technical and theoretical quicker than
really
I was expecting. Wow. Okay, but no, that's good. I think there's something useful there. All of which is to say, coming back to the point about strategy sometimes being all about status, right? Which is, I mean, it's a valid thing, right? People are trying to get ahead in life. Status is a good way to do that. Like, it's not to poo-poo the idea of status.
No, of course not. Yeah, and there is a role for people who have power in organisations and are steering the ship, etc.
Absolutely, but there is a whole other way of looking at strategy, which is you're not reliant on how other people see you. It's something that you can embody and do to, you know, to feel better about your, you know, the way that you can be in the world, right? The way that you can figure out what you do at work or in our personal lives as well. Like, I think we all know what it's like to realise we've been sleepwalking through a few days without being strategic about how we're using our precious time.
Yep.
And every day that is sleptwalked through is a day that you don't have anymore.
Oh my God.
Oh dear.
That's pretty bleak, isn't it?
What is it? It reminds me of the concept of memento mori.
Oh,
which
yeah.
The first time I came across that, I was horrified, and I thought, what an awful thing. Why do you want to have something that reminds you that you're going to die kind of around you all the time? But now I get it.
Yeah. We actually have one of those big posters that shows the weeks of your life.
We do. I went looking for that and I thought, oh my God, did I make Tom throw it in the bin?
Because, when we first got it, you were like, I don't want to see that.
I was like, oh God, what an awful thing. But now I think when we get our garden office put in, if you haven't put it in the recycling, then we can put it up in the garden office.
I'm pretty sure I've still got it somewhere.
But yeah, so I think I think it takes maybe some time to get used to the idea of thinking about, how you can use the time that you have in a way that feels better than just sleepwalking through or believing that you've got no ability to influence your own life, which is you kind of often see this. We were talking about the idea of having an internal locus of control.
Yeah.
So even in the shittest situations where you are, you know, imprisoned somewhere, you know, the worst things that humanity have ever done, there's stories about people who manage to kind of survive that. And quite often the theme is they've got an internal locus of control.
This is, I think, Man's Search for Meaning, isn't it? You're referencing there, Viktor Frankl.
And various, that
There's
wasn't the most recent place I heard about it. Now I can't remember where that story was, but it pops up all over the place.
Yeah.
And I think the point is, it's always possible to find something that you can have direct influence over in your life, most likely to do with yourself.
You can. Now, there's something else that I think is inherent to the stance of being less unstrategic or being more strategic, which is actually taking it and yourself less seriously. I think that is what frees you up to do it in the first place, because you can be very serious about it in decks and big momentous blah blah blah, but actually the way that people have always existed, the way that strategy tends to work in games, say, be more playful and open and accept that you can't know the answers, even if you try really hard.
Do you know what, though?
Yeah.
Hearing just be more playful is almost as annoying as hearing just be more strategic.
Yeah, just do that.
Can't you just do this incredibly difficult thing that if you don't know how to do it, then it's not going to be easy to learn how to do?
Yeah. So let me point at what I'm trying to get at in terms of...
I do agree, by the way.
I
do agree.
There's a particular tension, which is, I think, why, even at company level, we tend to advise our clients not to try to fixate on a particular goal. Because if you fixate on a goal and try to orchestrate the plan to get there, you are going to be frustrated. You are going to be frustrated, you're going to get upset, and you're going to take it as a personal insult against you. And you're going to get into self-blame. Well, it was us or it was them. And it becomes this fight against reality. Whereas if you can hold things more lightly and have multiple possible directions you're happy to go in, and say, well, I wonder what happens if I change this condition in the environment. I wonder what happens if we run an experiment, like we're currently doing an experiment where we're doing like warm outreach and just having lots of conversations, because we realised all of our business comes from people that we know who refer us on and then tend to create lots of happy clients. So we're saying, well, what if we lean into that and just play with that? Not with a target of we must win a client, but with the target of let's have more conversations and see how we can make that really enjoyable.
Yeah, it is a good example. I think it's something that is not always readily accessible to everyone. We can do it because we're running our own business and we get to just say, oh, well, we're going to stop caring about goals for a bit. That's not always as easy.
No.
Depending on the organisation. And so I have a suggestion for how to build that muscle in a different way.
Oh,
But
I love
anyway,
it. Yeah,
you,
because I was just want to clarify, we're not having goals. We still have the goal. We need to survive in the business.
okay, yeah.
You know,
There's always an existential goal, isn't there?
there is,
Like,
and
we need to
actually,
survive.
that is the root of being a strategic entity. Is number one survival, and that's a key thing. But there are ways to survive that are lighter, and there are ways to survive that are more desperate.
Yeah, there are, and I think, I mean, we've talked in various past episodes about how to just shift the frame that you have on your goals. So rather than saying we need to make 100 million next year, whatever it might be, it's we need to, test 10 radically different things.
Yeah.
Or we need to do, on a much smaller scale, we're going to do 5 experiments a week, or we're going to talk to 10 potential customers a week. Like that, make it kind of habit-based goals rather than outcome-based goals.
Yeah,
so you can have goals, and we do talk about goals.
We do, yeah. But it's a goals versus systems thing, isn't it?
Goals
and
versus
systems are
systems.
more likely to pay off.
Exactly. But I think the point that I was going to make is that often in work, it does feel like life and death. Like a lot of the time, you've got dependents that you've got to, pay for. You've got financial liabilities. You can't afford to lose your job, right? That's the reality.
And you've got a performance review round the corner.
And it's terrifying, and the economy is, in the... What's a good thing that we can say the economy is in?
The poo bin?
A cesspit, yeah. So I guess the point is, it's maybe not the best environment to try being playful if it's new to you. And that's where finding some other avenue... In my case, the thing that's really helped is dancing, because the stakes are much lower. Yes, you might embarrass yourself in front of a few people, but it's not going to mean that we can't pay the bills next month if that happens. So finding somewhere where there is room for play, and particularly where play is kind of baked into the DNA of it, right? Like that's not true for all dance classes, but it is for the ones that we teach. Which is Lindy Hop, type of swing dance.
Yeah.
And I did find the kind of play element really uncomfortable at first, but it was a low stakes environment where I was able to just kind of gradually dip a toe in and realise that, life goes on. Even if you fall flat on your face, life goes on. And gradually I've kind of learned to enjoy that and be more playful. And then it's a transferable skill. You can kind of put that hat on for then other areas of life, because you know what it feels like to be playful. And I think the sad reality is a lot of us we start out as playful kids. Society, education, whatever, squeezes it out of us over a period of decades, and then we have to re-find it again.
Right. Yeah, it reminds me, there's 2 things. One is one of the recent articles we put out, which is about exactly this, isn't it? Are you studying for the test? Have you asked, what is this going to be on the test, miss? And you're going to try and do that for your whole life? That's not a life. That's the opposite of being strategic. That's be it reverse engineering to pass goals, which are only a proxy for real life. But you're right, we get trained into that stance by the school system, by the sort of hurdles that are set up for us, by performance reviews. That's another study for the test, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And it doesn't necessarily teach you that. It's always more like a stance, isn't it? There's a stance and an embodied feeling of how you hold yourself and the world to be playful.
So would you go so far as to say that like playfulness is a prerequisite for being strategic? Always.
Oh, good question. I don't know that I could go that strongly about it. I think there's a total counterpoint to this, which I think is an interesting example of when the opposite of a good idea is also a good idea.
Yes.
Which is, it's a Dave Snowden point that humans innovate in times of stress. When we're in an absolute backed into a corner pinch, that's when we reach for radical repurposing. That's when you do exaptation and you get a lot of innovation. And it is well known that during wartime there's a lot more invention and innovation than there is during peacetime.
Right. I mean, it's that saying, necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah.
That comes from many foundations.
That's right. But there's an interesting, I think what you're looking at is perhaps a barbell sort of thing, where innovation is possible when you are like 10 out of 10 under pressure, or when you're 0 out of 10 playful, enjoying, or somewhere at the ends of the extreme. But most people live their lives at like 6 or 7, simmering 6 or 7, which is almost, it's like a U shape. That's when you're least likely to be able to. The stakes are too high to do the radical repurposing and take the massive risk that you're forced to because you have no choice. But the stakes are too low for that. But is that right? I've got mixed up. You're in a position where you're more afraid of losing what you've got. So either end of the scale, you're not afraid of losing what you've got, either because you feel relatively safe, or because you feel like you've got nothing to lose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Whereas I think, in a lot of your job type situation, it's much more simmering 6 or 7, and it's a bit, that's just high stress, it's burnout territory, it's that sort of thing.
Yeah, kind of constant medium stress is just, it's bad, isn't it?
It is. So the trick that we use with our work a lot, which I think, well, we're going to write more about soon, but it's uncertainty bubbles. And the point of an uncertainty bubble is you create the external surface that looks legible and comfortable for the organisation. So you're not trying to persuade anyone to do something radical or different or weird, but on the inside of the bubble, you create conditions of, you almost artificially impose the stress of a 10 out of 10 situation. You set yourself that you're going to speak with a customer every day and show them something new every day, which gives you that, like, there's a constraint that you set on yourself, which forces you to have to radically repurpose, to have to improvise, to have to do things that you wouldn't normally do, because you're changing the rules and being more playful.
And how do you avoid that feeling stressful to the point of it being unconstructive? Because to some people that is stressful, right? Like that's...
It is. I think you need to maybe practice a little bit. But one of the biggest things that I realise we use, that there's a trick we use in a lot of our workshops, say, which is just don't give people long enough to do it properly. If you haven't had long enough to do it properly, then of course it's not going to be very good. And that's okay. You don't have that sort of stress of, well, I've spent a month on this, it should be better. You know what I mean? If you've had to come up with something in 10 minutes, of course it's your first draft. Of course it's rubbish. No problem. Everyone's in the same boat. Whereas if you've gone away and thought about it and put loads of effort in, then you've got higher expectations on yourself. So it's always trying to disrupt the rules that you've set for yourself, which aren't real anyway. There's no reason that you have to say you're meeting a customer. I felt this when I was young in my career. I think you did too.
Yeah.
If you're going to show something that you've worked on to somebody, it better be damn good. You better be like 95% of the way there. But look at, say, the Pixar rule, which is the 20 to 80. So you should actually show things that are 20% done. But that's horrifying for most people. And I've certainly worked with teams of people who've struggled with that. But you force them to do it by breaking the rules and showing that those rules are just made up.
There is no spoon.
Yeah. So that's fun. I think that's a way to do it. How can you change? It's the way to perhaps be more strategic is to create a space, even if it's just for an hour or 5 minutes or whatever. Create a small uncertainty bubble where you can try out a radically different set of rules, which are much more about play, reaction, improvisation, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's just reminding me of, I mean, there are kind of implications to doing that sort of exercise, right? Because when you do that kind of radically unfinished, come up with something quickly, playfully, there is then follow-on work from that, because most of the time what you come up with is not something you can directly put out into the world. There is a bit of kind of sort of smoothing off the rough edges a little bit. It reminds me of our pitch provocations work. Like it's, I think, and that's where, you know, we've seen that as well. People do come out of these sessions and they found it really valuable, but there's also this kind of, there is this understanding that what they've put together isn't customer ready, and like what happens to it next.
Yeah.
Right? And so there is a kind of follow on from that, which involves a tiny bit of refinement, right? And getting it to a point where it's not actively going to offend somebody.
That's very true. And the pattern I've noticed, which I think we noticed with the latest pitch provocations work we did several deliberately wrong pitches which the client generated. We showed them to customers, we got the feedback, we did the whole process, and it was brilliant. I say so myself. But when we then come to refine it, actually you've had so much signal, so much learning, the answers are much clearer because you've done that improvisational, playful, exploratory part. You now understand the market much, much better. You understand what you're dealing with much, much better. Whereas if you don't know that, I think we see as the project nears completion, the stress increases. Because now it's like, but what if the fundamental thing is wrong and we're trying to polish it? And what if we've got it all wrong? And people get really stressed out.
So you're sort of almost front loading the stress. Because I guess what I'm trying to say is there is a huge element of courage required in taking these pitch provocations to essentially strangers, knowing that they are wrong, they're deliberately wrong, they're not finessed, they maybe even have inaccuracies in.
They may be offensive at times.
They might be offensive. They might accidentally be offensive.
Don't aim for that.
But like that is, I think I wouldn't want to sweep under the carpet the fact that you need to be courageous in being willing to show that to somebody you've never met before. And I think that is something that you in particular have built over many decades.
No, it's a
couple
muscle.
of decades.
It's a muscle that you build, isn't it?
But so it's front loading that stress as early as possible in the process, and having the resilience to like deal with that level of stress, right? And I think that's something that you've worked on for a long time to be comfortable with that.
That's true, yeah. And I think that's where there's the way to sort of build up to that is start smaller, isn't it? Start with something that's low stakes, that's just for you.
Exactly. Or
you're just going to show to somebody you know.
Show it to a colleague. Show it to somebody that you know within the organisation but who doesn't work in your department. So they're not really going to know what the thing is about.
Yeah.
And they will then be able to give you their honest reactions. But it's not as scary as, doing an official research call with some C-suite person who you've been put in touch with.
Yeah, and don't jump straight into trying to run a 4-hour workship for a C-suite when you're doing this. It's you build up to that.
You build up to it, but I think there's something important about just bringing that. There's inevitable stress at some point. You either delay it and you spend months or years working on something where you don't really know if it's going in the right direction, or you bring that stress as far forward as possible and get exposure to the reality of the market as soon as possible, to as many different provocations as possible, and then use that to give you a much more informed direction to move in from that point.
That's it. I think that there's kind of, I don't know do you call this strategic? I think what we're doing in that process, I would say, is being incredibly strategic. Because we know that there's that uncertainty to deal with at some point. So we say, well, let's deal with that first.
Right, yeah.
Because then everything else gets easier. Whereas if we start with the stuff that feels easy, then you're just putting off that nightmare.
Right, and it just balloons, like the nightmare balloons into something much bigger and harder to fix.
And you've sunk a load of cost into doing something that you then later find out is wrong.
Yeah, right. So exactly, and it's kind of this principle of using what is within your control to influence what's outside of your control. Well, the market reaction is outside of your control, but what you can interact with it by having conversations with people who are in the market.
Yeah.
And you can control what you put in front of them. So you can decide, ideally being playful, about what you're going to show them, and then you get that response back from them, and then that then boosts your own influence, doesn't it? Because then you have a sense for how people really react out there.
Yeah. I mean, we obviously love it. I think it's a method that we've used a lot with clients. I wanted to tie one more little loop around this all, which ties together dancing and strategy, sense making, and also improvisation, because I just had a random chat out of the blue yesterday with somebody who was in my Lindy Hop classes back in London when they were at the LSE, and now they are an improv teacher who also does strategy, sense making.
Oh my goodness,
that sort of stuff.
This is your soulmate. I'll show myself out.
But yeah, shout out. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but it's Angie Lina or Lina. So yeah, shout out. I was going to suggest an episode of the podcast for you to listen to. So why not listen to this one? Because I think
Nice.
there's something in that in terms of improv would be another place to go to practice that
Yes.
stance of playfulness and responsiveness, letting go of control.
Right, building resilience in the face of uncertainty,
Yeah.
getting comfortable, knowing that you don't know how someone else is going to react to something or how a group is going to react to something.
Yeah, and that you're going in without a plan.
Yeah.
And there's this really exciting aspect of it, I think, for what we do, which is in the improv games, the rules are changed. And there are rules which enable stuff to emerge, which normally wouldn't emerge. And you change the rules and you see different sorts of things emerge.
I love
And
that.
that's
Can
really
you give
cool.
an example of an improv rule?
Oh, so, well, the classic one that everybody knows is yes and, isn't it? Where, if you don't know that, the idea is somebody makes a suggestion, like someone says, "Oh, good morning, hot in here, isn't it?" You don't then say, "No, it isn't. It's minus 20." You instead build on that. You say, "Yes, and yes, it is hot in here." But then, of course, we are muffins in the oven. You know? And you play off that.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You let it go where it comes from. Blah, blah, blah. Let it go where it wants to go, and
yeah.
you're just responding.
Oh, we live in hope that our local improv classes are going to come back.
Yeah,
I do want to dip a toe in.
Yeah, that'd be really fun.
Very nice. You wanted to tie a loop? Has that tied the loop?
I think that's the loop. That is suggesting. So I think what we get to is this sense of strategy is fractal. So that was the first thing we touched on, wasn't it? Where, yes, you probably can't just do strategy for your whole organisation. There's a structure, there's a game at play there, which you may want to play as part of your strategy to get into the position where you are managing organisational strategy. But the fact that you can't have strategy in your name right now, or that you can't control what the organisation does, doesn't mean don't be strategic with what you're doing and how your life is. And then we looked at how being less unstrategic or being strategic, there are ways to do it which are very stressful, but you can do it much more lightly. And one of the biggest tricks is to set up different rules for yourself for a short while to create an environment where different things can emerge than can normally emerge. And you could play with that sort of thing in your personal life through dance, through improv classes, or through other exercises. Feel free to suggest if you know any that you've been using or that are really good for this, then do let us know. We love hearing from you.
We do. tentacles@crownandreach.com.
Yeah. And so that's it. You can go and play with that being strategic right now.
There we go. Enjoy.